Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we got.
All right. Well, it sounds like
We got to go on now.
yeah, it sounds like we're okay. So wait, so to run our so for our aux and everything else needs to be back in program. All of it. Program and audition? Yeah. For yeah, for the cool edit. Okay.
And we've got Seth on, and you can hear us, Seth, right?
Hear you loud and clear. Yeah. How does it sound on my end?
Yeah, you sound great. Yeah, you sound great. So we're gonna get ready to do our intro and play all of our stuff. And okay, thanks,
thank you.
Alyssa. Do you want to do the podcast recorder too?
Yeah. Hold on. I'm going to reduce this to a little bit of his show out.
Reggae runnings.
Yeah, I'm going to let it queue up here. Let's see.
And you got my no swearing, right?
Yes.
No
yeah.
swearing.
Okay.
No problem. I usually don't anyway. So.
Okay. I'm going to drop our mics real quick here.
Okay.
No more uptown, downtown. We all run together on one ground. No more uptown, downtown. Got to bring my soul on the one ground. We're the social of our way and come down. Together in a one love jump down. The social of our way and come down. London in a one love jump down. And I something to know say. If I win on the
We're getting close here, everybody. We're figuring things out as we always do. Hey. Yeah. All right.
8 years in the running.
I have to. You just have to wait for this to click over.
Wait for
you guys, when you go live, let me know because I'm going to push live on my end too, and I'll broadcast in the Facebook group that I have.
We're getting real close.
KXRN LP.
Laguna Niguel, Laguna Beach.
Member supported
KXFM on 104.7.
KXFMradio.org.
This disclaimer is a statement notifying listening audiences that any opinions expressed in our shows are not representative of Laguna Radio Inc., its management, or its board of directors.
You're listening to Awakening Code Radio. Mind-expanding, heart-opening, talk and music to raise your vibration.
Some people consider it the shifting of the ages. Others see it as a whole new paradigm for humanity. But whatever you want to call it, it's hard to deny that we are in a moment of immense change. A moment challenging us to wake up and live life more consciously. This is Eric Rankin.
And I'm Michelle Anderson, and you're listening to Awakening Code Radio,
where the conversation is always about raising the vibration of love, compassion,
happiness, forgiveness, stewardship, health, and peace.
Thank you for joining the conversation.
This is Deepak Chopra.
Hi, I'm Marianne Williamson.
Hi, this is Greg Braden, and you are listening to Awakening Code.
Awakening Code Radio.
Oh, yes, you are. Here we are at Awakening Code Radio, starting our 9th year. We passed our landmark anniversary show last week. This is October. Almost, it's the weekend before Halloween or the Tuesday before Halloween. And Tuesday before election, next Tuesday. all kinds of big things going on. Welcome to Awakening Code Radio. If you haven't heard our show before, maybe you're listening on your FM radio. Welcome to the show. Maybe you have. Maybe you're a live stream listener. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of people. We get about 150,000 downloads a month of our podcast. So if you're just one of our live streamers, we appreciate you. And of course, all of our podcast listeners, we appreciate you because you're the biggest part of our audience is podcast listeners. So hello, Michelle.
Hello. I wanna wish one of our listeners a happy birthday. I noticed it was Brandy Bachman's birthday.
Okay.
So happy birthday, Brandy. And Millie, thank you so much for jumping in and sending us presents that Colleen told us you sent. And we just thank you all so much. And it's really a pleasure to be here tonight. Really excited for tonight's show.
Yes. And I am the other half of your hosting team, Eric. Have I ever said my last name on the show? I wonder if I have. Eric,
Always.
Eric, I always say it?
Yeah.
Eric Rankin?
Always.
Huh. Well, there you go. It's only been 8 years, you know. I'm still getting my feet are still wet. All right. Why don't you introduce our guest and we'll get going on our conversation.
Oh my gosh. I am so I'm just so uplifted and inspired by how all of this went down. And I know you, our listeners, our family, you hear these stories of synchronicity almost every week when I talk about how we get our guests, how we find our guests. And this is another one of those synchronistic things where I was on the phone yesterday to listener Lori Taylor. Shout out to you, Lori Taylor. And she was asking me who our guest was going to be. And I said, you know, Lori, I don't have a guest yet, as usual. And I really was, you know, trying to feel into the energy of what's going on because in our backyard, we've had 90,000 people evacuated today due to a raging fire here in Southern California in the city of Irvine. And it's affected a lot of our friends. And so I was a little bit, you know, discombobulated from that. And knowing that next week is election week and we don't plan on being here in the studio, I was just really trying to feel into who would be the right guest to be a calming voice and to share some profound wisdom. And Lori Taylor said, Michelle, what about that guy I told you about a few months back named Seth? And she was trying to remember his name. She said it's Seth Leaf Pruzansky, and she wasn't quite sure. And I said, refresh my memory. And she went to his Facebook page and sent me over his information. And I've been down the rabbit hole with Seth's information, just falling in love with who he is as just a luminous being. And it turns out he has just recently written a book and launched a book called The Fight to Enlight. He has an incredible website, which we titled our show after tonight, called I'm Awake, Now What? And I think we're going to find out now what. He's also got an incredible rock and roll band called In the Wind. And we will be playing one of his songs from his band tonight. But Seth, welcome. I see that you're on Zoom with us, but our listeners can't see that you're on Zoom with us yet. And did you tell me you were going to post it somewhere so that they could see it live?
Yeah. I've got a group on Facebook called the Water Consciousness Movement, and it'll be in there.
Okay, so if you go to the Water Consciousness Movement on Facebook, admin Colleen, if she's listening right now, she'll probably be going to the Water Consciousness Movement and find it and post it on our Awakening Code page. And I'll be trying to do that as well. But Seth, I don't know that I've ever done so much research on somebody that's been a guest on our show as I did. I really, really went down the rabbit hole. I read the first chapter of your book. I was hooked the minute I, kind of tuned into it, where you start right off the bat about how you were conceived and that your father had gotten struck by lightning the day before you were conceived. And I was riveted. I didn't want to put it down. It was like I went to Amazon and you give the free chapters, and I was thinking, I have got to get this book. I want to read this book. And I watched a few different videos with you. You did a podcast with our dear friend Matt Belair. You did a podcast with our friend Laura Eisenhower. You've done a Divine Feminine and a Divine Masculine podcast. But I will tell you, the one that what I was riveted to while I was in the bathtub getting ready for the show tonight, I listened to your entire, I think it was a live you did called Am I a Narcissist? Did that recently. And I listened to the whole thing. I cried right along with you. That was an incredibly vulnerable share that you shared with, I guess you triggered a few people by a picture you posted of
Yeah.
yourself. And, hey, props to you for being as in shape and as healthy as you are, and using your knowing that pictures, we're visual creatures. You posted this picture really to drive traffic to your book, to the launch of your book. So I would like to start there.
Yeah, you got my attention. I don't know what the picture is.
Yeah, yeah. It's I'm sure it got a lot of attention. And
Yeah.
for me, it just showed you were being authentic and real. I didn't see you as a narcissist. It looks like you really you take care of yourself. Um, and God, there's so much more. I could start with the very beginning of, where I went and I looked into a lot of where you came from, your background, your roots, how you grew up, how you got involved in drugs and had a heroin addiction and kick that. And I don't know. Eric usually likes to start at the beginning and I jump into the middle and then we go backwards. So
Well, I was intrigued by your father being struck by lightning the day before you were conceived. Is that what you said? It instantly reminded me
It
of
was
the movie Powder. Did you ever see that movie? Powder.
mm,
And his mother was struck by lightning the day he was born. She was they were headed to the hospital and she was struck by lightning. So there you go. It's the struck
that's
by lightning
great. Yeah, that's and made that connection. That's perfect.
connection. So yeah, let's start where you want to start. I mean, in your adventure, your particular journey, your path of awakening. I'm all in.
Okay. So let's just dive right into us as individuals perceiving this collective situation that we all find ourselves in right now. Most people didn't realize that they've constructed a perceptual prison of their own making. And now that the world is in lockdown or in prison or whatever you want to call it, people are beginning to wake up to the recognition that they aren't as free as they initially imagined themselves to be. And with that comes all kinds of layers of perception, of triggers, of pain, of disbelief, just on and on and on, that can be so overwhelming to somebody who has never faced this stuff and or doesn't have the tools or the internal resources to know how to face them. So I'm somebody who had to learn the hard way that I had constructed this perceptual prison of my own making, and I was physically incarcerated. It took me being physically incarcerated to actually realize that I was in this self-created prison for decades before I was actually physically incarcerated. So it was in that place and in that position that I began the deconstruction of who I believed myself to be, of what I thought the world was. I just went layer upon layer, beneath layer, until there was nothing left but just this energy that's causing my heart to beat, that's causing all these autonomic functions to happen in my body faster than the speed of light. I just kept going and going inward, deeper and deeper and deeper until that's all that there was. And I made sure that once I would get into those spaces, that I could sustain them. And I did it in an environment that was so difficult and so challenging, but it was perfect to do this, to make this kind of a commitment. So that's kind of like the medicine that I'm bringing at this point into the world, in that most people don't recognize how incarcerated they actually are. And the way to get out is within our ability to recognize it for what it is. So that's essentially what I help people do.
I watched the video or part of it, the video of you giving a workshop, it looked like, to a rehab center in Hawaii and telling about your experience. I really felt like when we talked today, Seth and I talked from 11:11 to 12:12 California time. I thought that was so auspicious.
Yeah.
But when we spoke today, one of the things that I shared with you is we are seeing massive amounts of numbers of young people committing suicide and becoming hooked on heroin and opiates and really having a hard time getting off. And I personally know somebody in that situation right now. We have had um, another woman on here that was talking about human trafficking and the girls getting into it because of their addictions.
Yeah.
And when I listened to your story about, and this was many years ago, it sounds like it was over 22 or
Yeah.
over 20 years ago when you had this addiction. Um, and listening to you tell the story about how you just got on a plane and cold turkeyed it going all the way to Jamaica, and that cannabis actually helped you get over your addiction. Do you want to dive into that part, and then because that was a really powerful story.
It's like one of those things where, at the time I wasn't thinking, I was just in such a state of desperation because I had gotten to a point where I had overdosed so many times. And I knew that if I didn't stop using, I would die. And I'm living in the woods of Maine. I'm not surrounded by community. I'm not really surrounded by any kind of support system that seemed like it was beneficial. The only support there was to get on methadone or to get on other drugs, to get off those drugs. And I knew I didn't want to do that because it just didn't feel right to me. But the alternative was I need to face my demons. I need to stare this down until I pass through it. And I knew that that wasn't going to be easy. So I just totally took a chance. I didn't know where, I knew I was going to Jamaica. I had the phone number for some people there, but I didn't know these people. I had no idea what I was getting into, but it was just desperation interwoven with faith. I somehow had faith in something that I couldn't articulate, I couldn't see, and that wasn't at all clear to me at the time. But it was there enough for me to say, you know what, I'm just going to do this. And I got there and I got robbed. I went through all these terrible things. And, I did my last fix before I actually got on the plane in the state of Maine. And so by the time I got to Jamaica, I'm just going through really brutal withdrawals. And, literally within the first day of being there, being like, okay, I'm going to get on a plane and go back to Maine because this was not a good idea.
Mm.
And calling these people who I'd never met or talked to and telling them, yeah, we decided we're going to head back to Maine. I was with a close friend of mine who's also going through the same thing. So we did have each other as a support system to go through this. But these people that I called who I'd never met, didn't know, were like, don't leave. We are coming to get you. And I just kept emphasizing, I was like, you don't know how sick we are. And he didn't care. He's like, I don't care. I'm coming to get you. Just wait there. And I looked at my friend and he's like, we're here. Why not? And I remember that moment being just surrender at a level that I had never been able to consciously surrender at. And it was like, okay, in that moment, I had to accept the unacceptable and really come to terms with, I may not make it out of here. I might die on this island. And the fear that that brought up, which is crazy because you think, why would you be afraid if you're putting drugs into your arm, and into your veins? Like, why would you be suddenly afraid of dying? But when you're faced with mortality, when you're faced with the reality that you are not this body, you are something else that is animating this body, that is giving this body the opportunity to live, the deep questions start to come up in life. So long story short, these people took care of me and saved my life. And it was the most brutal and beautiful experience that I had had at that point in my life. And getting through it allowed me to conjure up willpower that a lot of people need to know they have the capability to conjure up, to develop, to bring out of themselves, not just for drug addiction, but for everything that we're facing individually and collectively as a species.
That had to be. Who was this person that ended up sort of turning it around and saving you?
The person that I went with, or the people there?
The people there. Who were they? How did you find them?
So a friend of mine just gave me their phone number, a friend of mine who lived in Boston. He said, they're a nice family. He said, just call them. So it was a husband and a wife and a bunch of kids who lived in Jamaica. You know, I didn't know, I had never had a conversation with them at all. And they just selflessly displayed this act of generosity and love that it speaks volumes to the type of mind and heart set that many of us kind of have a feeling we could or are able to get into if we're going to turn this global situation in our world around. They just gave selflessly without any expectation. And it was such an example that I was like, my God, I have got to succeed. I've got to make it through this just because of the outpouring of love and generosity that these people I don't know are sharing with us. So it was like a reciprocal relationship, but on such a deep soul level that it was so moving, and it was like so having the fire lit underneath you that it catalyzed me on all my human levels to stick with it, to keep with it, to really trust that whatever this process was that was happening to me, it was for my own well-being, and it was for the greater good of my own evolutionary path through this human experience. And I did it. I made it through. And I knew that as a result of making it through that, well, no, let me say it, as a result of making it through, it empowered me with the ability to understand myself and the suffering of the human condition at a level that prior to I wouldn't have ever been able to understand.
That's a beautiful story. Just thinking of people in selfless service, we mention that all the time to people, that's always an option. And it is really, we believe, should be the driving force of your life, is thinking of being in service. But in these days, especially in any days, it's like I'm doing so much here trying to keep all the plates spinning by paying my mortgage and now maybe homeschooling my kids and paying the bills, and I'm behind in money. You're asking me to go out and actively be of service to people. And it's somehow these people living it are a testimony to what it does, because it hits on a level, and it's true gifting. When you said it was a gift, this is not like we'll take care of you and there's some going to be some expectation of reciprocity. There wasn't. They knew what they were on this planet to do, was to be of service and trust that the people that they're supposed to be of service to will show up. It's not just anybody. They probably didn't have the gifts to help, hey, my car broke down, can you fix it? No, I'm not a mechanic. But they were the people to be of service to you. And they must have felt that and known that and said, here we are. We're stepping up to the plate of what a big part of what we're on this planet to do, and model it for our children. And those reverberations just keep spreading out. And through you, you lived through it. Now you have a different take on what life looks like and the significance of being of service. So that's a beautiful story for sure.
I'd like to add to that. A lot of people, when they think of selfless service, they'll automatically associate it with doing physical acts or things that they feel are beyond their means because they feel so stuck or locked into whatever life situation they have. But in this case, and in many cases, selfless service is really an outpouring of empathy. Like when I went through that situation, I was at my most vulnerable. I mean, I could hardly walk, I could hardly talk, I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink. I wanted to cry with everything in me, but I was so dehydrated, I couldn't. I mean, I was so vulnerable that I did not want like, you don't want anybody to see you in that state. And they just didn't even care at all. They just so loved every single bit of the parts of me that were suffering, to the degree that it made me realize, like, that's really what it comes down to. Like, for people who feel like they want to do more and give more, you first have to be able to feel that within you. And so having
I was
empathy,
just
yeah.
going to say that, and Michelle, I know you have something to say, but there's a lot of analogies. Jesus talked about this, but your cup being so full. So with selfless service, if you are running on an empty tank yourself, and you go and you're depleted by all the energy it takes to run your life, the last thing you think you can hear is how can it be of service. But what this family modeled is their life was so abundant that they knew they could be of service. That's why being of service can be such a good thing and make you more whole. The person providing this help in the moment is it you have trusted so much that you've let the universe. It's not your personal energy or your personal love, or a lot of times even your personal money that is helping someone. It is flow through. It is where you've set yourself off to the side and your ego is off to the side, and you have allowed this stream, and it does reciprocate. It's like an infinity loop. You're in the loop now. Sometimes you're on the receiving end, sometimes you're on the gifting end, but it comes from a sense of, I already feel abundant, and from this abundant place, I can share. And that's a huge differentiation when we talk about this selfless service. Is it doesn't mean sacrificing yourself, your last bit of energy to help someone. It means you feel so full that, of course, when someone comes up to me, it's not going to be any sweat off my back. It is going to be easy and fun, and allows me to express my love for this individual and people at large.
um,
I
that's so
want to
beautiful.
give gratitude to that family. Just I'm feeling them in my heart right now, Seth, and
Mm.
bless them for doing what they did for you, taking a chance and coming to pick you up, asking you to stay when you were, ready to leave because you I mean, I'm sure that was a very difficult time in your life. And so I just have such gratitude for what they did and how they modeled that and how you responded to it, because your life seems so abundant now in watching the many aspects of you. One of the things that came through for me today, the word balance came through. You feel very balanced to me. You feel very cosmic, very tuned into the quantum field, really aligned with the all that is, knowing where we have the potential to go, that infinite potential, not losing sight of that. But you're also very grounded in you're a businessman. You have a living nuts company where you're selling organic, healthy nuts. And you've also got a water company. I love that you're selling water that comes from the original source that's never even seen sunlight, raw water. I get it. We've had Chris Sanborn McCundy on the phone on the show with us before, and I love that you have both of these businesses going, but at the same time, you work on yourself, you work on getting this message out, you work on giving humanity hope for our future, and really bringing people back into the awareness of this. One thing that you use a lot is the heart brain coherence and how that looks and feels. Um, I I really feel like what you're doing is you're helping to get humanity to that next level of our evolution because you went through it. We haven't talked yet really about we touched upon your stint in prison, and I noticed that you went to prison for a nonviolent drug trafficking charge. Is that right?
Yeah, marijuana. Hmm.
Yeah. So, here marijuana is legal in California, Colorado. We see it as plant medicine that's really changing the face of our medical system and watching so many people heal from cannabis. And we've done a show called Cannabis Consciousness, and giving people other resources to use cannabis for anxiety and for autism and cancer and all epilepsy and all sorts of things that cannabis is doing. So you went to prison. You were there for what, 3 years?
Mhm.
But it sounds like, you know, I look at it like you had a you had a choice point. So it's like you came to a choice point when you kicked heroin and decided, this I don't want this to rule my life anymore. It was a decision that you made, and you had the willpower to get through that. And then you get into prison, and it sounds to me like you made another decision
And in
on
many,
how you were going to handle that. You know, some people could collapse in on themselves in prison and go nuts. And instead, you did what?
the opposite. But it took, like you said, these choice points. It's almost like when you realize that you're constantly being influenced by the world around you from the time you're born, you know, even before you're born, the world is imprinting you, it's conditioning you, it's fashioning you to be the person you are, not even including all of the past life and karmic stuff that could be implications in it all. But you are being conditioned right away as soon as you begin to take form. And that so much becomes how you perceive yourself and the world around, to the degree that we just think that's who we are and that's what life is. And we lose the real point, which is that's an extension or a secondary aspect of what we actually are. And so it's really about a reprioritization of values. So so many want a better world. We want a balanced world. We want an equal world, a world that is based upon systems and principles and structures that truly allow us to thrive and feel whole as these beings that we are. But so many people don't even seem to know where to begin. And so, because of this conditioning that we've all had and been subjected to as a result of being born into this body, we always think that things are going to happen from the outside in, right? Nobody ever really told us that we can make things happen from the inside out. And so we blindly go through life thinking that somebody or something is going to make a monumental difference in our own life or in the world around us, never actually fully taking responsibility for how we're perceiving it. But when something happens that is beyond our control or that we don't like or that totally shatters our self and worldview, we kind of have two options. One, resist it and just do everything you can to wish it didn't happen and reject it and push it away, or embrace it. And that is, it's in situations like that when people really get to find out what they're made of. But embracing it seems like such a difficult thing because nobody's ever taught us how to do that in a way, or empowered us with the ability to believe in these greater aspects of ourselves. And sadly, most people, like you said, whether they're in prison or even now, I mean, there's so many people as a result of COVID who are falling apart. Like their whole world is caving in because they don't have the internal resources to be able to look at this from a greater perspective. But essentially, what it comes down to is just that. It's the ability to have an objective, zoomed out viewpoint on a subjective experience, right? Because all this conditioning that we've had since we were born has caused us to think that I'm Seth, this is my life, these are the people in my life, this is what I do, this is who I am. We are so focused on everything around us as being our identity. We identify with our car, our partner, our kids, our money, our bank account. Like these are all the things that we give all of our attention to. And nobody has taught us that if we do the opposite, really build an internal foundation on focusing on our insides. And that can be, I mean that literally Metaphorically, there's many different levels of that. But essentially, it's like if somebody taught us that if we make a consistent habit of focusing on the harmony that has the potential to exist within our body and all the organs of it, then suddenly we're perceiving things not from a separatist viewpoint, right? Because when we're just focused on everything around, that's like we're focused, that's the icing on the cake. We're not even focusing on the cake. And so there's a massive disconnect. But when we focus internally, really build up that foundation of feeling what it's like to have a body and a mind that is in harmony with the energy that is animating the human being, then suddenly we're not spending all this time focused on all these external things that we become addicted to. We literally become addicted to our own responses to things that are external to us, totally invalidating the most priceless, invaluable thing that we have all been blessed with, which is the spark of life. It's this energy that is causing our heart to beat. When we realize that is the only thing that truly has value in this world, and we begin to take steps to give attention to where attention is due, when you pay attention to that, attention pays you. Not, it could be monetary, it could be all that, but you don't care, because when you start to give yourself this type of internal attention and you feel what it's like to be in sync with the rhythms of your body, then your awareness becomes imbued with greater virtues. You know that what you truly are is something that is far beyond what your mind could ever conceive of with this conditioning that most of us are so addicted to or subjected to.
I get that, and I know that a lot of people are spinning right now and wondering, how do I get to that place? How do I find the tools to not react in anger or fear or sadness? You know, the grief comes over them, and how do you pull it out of yourself? Eric, did you want to stop for a song?
Sure.
I
Why
know
don't we take a song break?
um, Seth, normally, because we are an FM radio station, we usually play music. And one of the things that I talked with you about today was you have a band called In the Wind. Is that right? Is it In the Wind? Yes,
Yeah.
In the Wind. And I went and looked at your videos for heavy metal. You know, he's got a great rock and roll band, and I want to encourage our listeners to go look on YouTube for In the Wind. I did watch Speaking in Stone, which is about crystals. It's a little more hard rock than we normally play. So I'm going to go ahead and play your song, Point of View, which I think is kind of one of the things we want to talk about here on the show is how people have differing points of view. We all have a point of view, and how we can get along when we all have a point of view. So here's In the Wind with Seth, and this is called Point of View. And I think our listeners aren't hearing us on your Facebook Live. They're texting me and saying,
I know, I see that. I don't know what to do about that.
Special.
This is Deepak Chopra, and you're listening to Awakening Code Radio.
You sure are. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you haven't got our podcasts on any podcast platform, I meant to say caught, and I kind of said cat. You just look up Awakening Code Radio. You can Google search it. You can search it through iTunes, whatever you want. We've got over 400 shows, past episodes, and you can just kind of randomly scroll through, or maybe you know a guest or somebody's recommended a guest that they liked on our show. We've had so many amazing ones. So we appreciate that. We have a Facebook page, of course. Like us there. We have a fan tribe page. It was started by a couple of our fans. It became friends and family out in Virginia. And we just have so many ways to stay in touch. And our amazing admin is always managing our board and behind the scenes all week long, posting inspirational things from our show and making sure that we see the messages if you want to reach either Michelle or I. We're talking to Seth, and you have a great voice, my friend.
Oh, thank you.
Oops.
I appreciate that.
What Eric?
There. How about that? Did you hear that?
No, I heard the music. I didn't hear what
Said
you
you
just did.
have a great voice.
You, yeah, so much passion and soul. And I was thinking to myself today, this guy is destined for greatness. Is he going to take off with his music career, his water, his food, or his consciousness raising information with the book? I know you want to reach millions of people with your book, and I hold that vision in my heart for you that you do. I really look forward to diving deep into your book. You're very authentic and just raw and real, and yet so tuned in to what it feels like our future has the potential to be. And you're the bridge to get many of us across to that place, out of fear and into this infinite possibility that we're all co-creating. That's what I sense about you, and I'm
Yeah,
happy
that's
to watch you
beautiful.
soar.
It's I'm like the anti-guru. Like I'm just somebody who is so aware of what is happening here, and I care so much about that outcome more than these little tiny outcomes that almost everybody's focused on, that I know that the more that individuals awaken, you could say, to this potential that is in them anyway, and begin to perceive themselves in reality from that place, the more we're going to break free from all that has held us back, not even just in this life, but for countless lifetimes. We free our ancestry from things we didn't even know were keeping us enslaved by. And that is what brings me joy and completeness. And the reason why is because I've had such an extreme life where I've been brought over to the other side, never ever, like every bit of the human being I believed myself to be was gone. And when something happens, when you cross over from who you think you are and you feel the edge of all your emotions and thoughts and all that, and you start going through an involuntary process that a lot of people probably sense or intuitively know that they have to go through something, but they don't want to face it. They're so afraid of it. And so at a deeper level, they resist that. But here's the thing, like, and I said this the other day, nobody really knows what happens when you die, but every one of us is going to find out. So with that mindset, it's only logical that we start coming to terms with that now, because we're actually endowed with the circuitry, with the ability to do this, to harmonize our perception of self in reality with the greater reality that exists. And when we do that, we make a commitment out of doing that, we prioritize it, then suddenly that starts to come back into us. We start to emit that in the world. It's essentially we're sanctifying our own human existence and this world by our devotional commitment to this force that, a lot of people, I don't believe in God, or I don't believe in this. It's like, well, what's causing your heart to beat? I mean, right? Like, okay, it's okay. You don't have to have any beliefs or anything, but what is causing this body to be here? Because it's not you, right? Like I know that me with my life and all the things that I'm doing is I can influence my body. Absolutely. We all can do that. But am I the source of energy that is allowing this to take place to begin with? No, I'm not. There is a profound innate intelligence that is animating us, and it is always there. And when we take what limited intelligence you could say we have, and I don't say that as an insult, but when we take our limited awareness and we start to focus it on this innate, unlimited intelligence that is animating our body, then suddenly our perception of self and the world begins to metamorphosize. And it does it in a way that at first we might want to resist because it feels so big and it feels scary. But if we stick with it and we keep coming up against those edges of resistance that we don't want to give into, just like water erodes rock, those things, you could say, those fields of energy that have accumulated throughout countless lifetimes and are being emanated and projected through our current life experience begin to dissolve. They begin to erode, just like water erodes rock. And when we do that and we continue to do that, then suddenly we're not so hung up on all the things that we're most used to getting hung up on. And we don't believe so much in the narrative that everybody is so addicted to believing is all there is. And the reason why is because this innate intelligence that is in every single one of us has the ability to be in harmony with itself. And when it is in harmony with itself, you become aware of what that feels like, because it's a very different feeling than, oh my God, I'm stressed out and this is my life and I have to do this and all. When you let go of all that and you train yourself to feel what this internal harmony feels like, the feeling of it is so profound, it's so beautiful, and it is supported by the harmony of the planet beneath our feet, which is supported by the harmony of the solar system that it's in, which is supported by the harmony of the galaxy that it's in. You know, this goes on and on and on into forever. So when we shift our attention to this natural law, this natural state of coherent energy that is the absolute source that allows us to perceive anything at all, and we make that our number one priority instead of all our problems, instead of all our fears, instead of all the things that we think are normal, then suddenly a new normal begins to come into focus. And that new normal is something that nobody can deny. It is so, it is the feeling of knowing yourself as something that doesn't ever die, something that is truly committed and truly connected to these unseen, invisible, mostly unknown forces of energy, of reality that animate the entire living universe. When you get into those states and you realize that they're the only thing that is actually real, then suddenly all the things that you think are real and think are a problem don't seem like such big problems anymore. You calm down, relax, and you realize that things aren't what they seem. And that's very empowering.
It is. We've talked about the book. Seat is it not Seat of the Soul? What is it? Was it Seat of the Soul with the horse running on the thumb? And we talk about the ability to get to this place of being the observer. And you kind of danced around it as you were talking, that we get so caught up in the small dramas of life, and you just think that's all there is, because life seems to be so full of them, of the arguments you have and the relationships you have and the the things that need tending to, that your observation field is just full of that. You're in the trees, but there is the ability to literally pull yourself out. A lot of people on vacation will do this, that they distance themselves physically, and you have a different idea of what your life is like back there. It gives you some perspective. But you can do that same thing without physically moving away from your problems, away from, your quote unquote daily life. You can expand yourself to be the observer of your life. And it's in that place, at least it was for me. And it sounds like that's what's happened to you, is you realized you had the ability, you had the choice first, and then the ability to follow it through, to imagine yourself as the greater observer. And it's that observer that knows that it is connected to everything all the time, in all ways, all life in all dimensions, as Michelle would say, and then bring that back to the smaller perspective of you in the earth suit walking around on the planet. But that's when life does change, is when you're aware of both of those realities, and not balancing them so much as merging your spiritual awareness with your earth plane, the gift of your earth plane existence.
Beautifully
We
said.
we just we just got a text from one of our listeners, Millie, and she says, listening to you all live and this encapsulation of internal external alignment is one of the best I've heard. Great guest choice.
Oh.
So
I didn't have a choice.
Eric didn't have a choice. Millie, I didn't want to mess up your name. I messed it up last time. So I wanted, because she goes by Millie, but I didn't want to make the same mistake I made last time and pronounce your name wrong. But thank you for listening live. And Seth, you are so moving with the way that you explain things. And you know, one of the other things that I came upon when I was doing my research and when I sent that invitation to you was you had made a post on your Facebook page where you talked about, everybody wanted to know your political point of view. And that post had me riveted because I really felt what you were saying. And I think in our next hour, what we decided to do was do our first hour kind of getting to know you a little bit more about you. And
To quote a song.
and then getting to know you.
And getting to know more about you.
And then I wasn't doing that on purpose. And then going into the second hour. So anybody listening live is going to hear the full 2 hours with Seth. And we're going to play our second hour with you on election night when, the world feels like it. So many people are just sitting on the edge of our seat saying we can't see past that day and we don't know what's going to happen. And I feel so many people, you know, the tension is there. So I definitely want to go into our second hour with you talking about those things. But we have a little bit of time left in this hour. And one of the things that you touched upon in your, I think it was on your YouTube channel where you called it "Am I a Narcissist?" That's how they can find that actual. It was about an hour long where you really dropped in and got very raw and very real, and I appreciated it. And I saw a lot of the comments on your YouTube channel with people just really feeling what you were saying and being um so appreciating how much you shared. About 37 minutes in, you talked about, this is kind of a touchy subject, but a lot of my friends are going through this dynamic with the masculine, feminine, and changes happening in their sex lives. And you just put it out there and said you haven't had sex in a long time, and you made a vow to the universe that you only wanted to have divine union. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about that in this last few minutes of this segment.
It's a beautiful topic, and it's one that so many people could use a lot of help with. But let me try to summarize the whole thing. Every single one of us have come into this world as a result of two people having sex, obviously. But how many of us were born through two beings that had prioritized this internal state of awareness as more important than anything else, to the degree that the sacredness that we truly are, that is animating our being, is at the driving force that is responsible for how we think, how we conduct ourselves, for everything. Very few. So sex has been turned into this external, addictive thing that it never actually was. That's the use of sex from an external perspective is such a small part of what it truly has the potential to be. Because just like I said, directing all this attention inwards and creating this internal state of being is something that everybody can do. And it's such a monumental and foundational part of life. It's the same thing with sexual energy. When you direct sexual energy internally instead of externally, then you're able to use your own life force. You know, again, this is the same thing that created every single one of us. When you take that energy and you direct it internally to all the organs of your body, which have glands, which have plexus centers that are wired essentially, and you keep doing that, those centers become activated with the seed, you could say, the essence of what that energy truly represents. And if that sexual energy is what actually creates life externally, then what can it do to the life inside of us internally when we make a habit out of focusing on redirecting it inside of us first? And once, when I was in prison, I just knew to do this. I didn't have a blueprint. I didn't have a roadmap. I didn't have any instructions, but I just knew that, I'm not gay. I love gay people, but I wasn't going to be having sex in prison. And I knew that. And so I made a choice right away. Like, what am I going to do? Try to ignore it. Like if I just, because especially in men have such a primal sex drive that a lot of men can't get a grip on it. And we see that playing out so much. I mean, so much of the dynamics that exist in our world and the patriarchal imbalance that we're witnessing is in many ways what's responsible. I don't want to say responsible, but it is the disproportionate imbalance of masculine energy trying to dominate and direct the way we exist on this planet that is creating such an imbalance. And so when men especially really say, you know what, I'm going to draw a line in the sand. I am done. I'm going to take a vow of celibacy. And it doesn't have to look like this or be like this, and you don't have to do it instantly like I did, but I just knew that there was something way greater than the feeling between my legs when that happened. I don't know what I'm allowed to say in the show, so I don't want to be too crude or explicit here, but I knew that there was something way greater than just that. The orgasm or the orgasmic feeling when redirected into all these internal organs and glands and plexus centers of our body. I just knew that if it can create life outside of me, it can do something to the life inside of me. And the first time, as a result of doing this and just redirecting this energy and being super aware of it, because I just gave so much time to focusing on it, when it went into my heart, I had a full-blown heartgasm, you could say. And when that happened, I was like, it just changed everything, because I realized that I could feel that energy anywhere in my body. And so essentially what I would do is this, is when you breathe rhythmically and you get into a calm state, you can eventually begin to feel your pulse just by being aware of it. And you can feel it anywhere that you focus on in your body. And when you feel it, say you're focusing on your pituitary gland, which is in the middle of your head, when you're really calm and you're breathing rhythmically and you're smiling inwardly, I always tell people to do that because you want to feel good. And you can begin to feel the pulse in that gland, say, the act of paying attention to that, of focusing on it, creates an amplification of the attention and the energy that is already there, allowing it to grow and expand. And that is what begins to activate these dormant perceptual energy centers that are in every single one of us. And the feeling of that is so great when you do it and it begins to happen, that you get to a point where you literally don't care if you ever have or think about sex again, because that is at such a new level of experience that it just changes everything. And with that comes so many like revelations and epiphanies and ideas that, my God, look at how the human species individually and collectively have been using and abusing sexual energy in such a limited way, in a very abusive way. And you realize that from that place, it's almost like the codes need to be rewritten. Not they need to, they absolutely can be rewritten by individuals choosing to redirect just their sexual energy alone. Because when that does happen, you start having these feelings and they are just activating you and lighting you up, and you feel what it's like to be in harmony with this energy that we all are, that's allowing our body to exist. It so fundamentally changes the way you perceive yourself in reality, that you don't want to interact with the world the way you used to. You want to take steps and think thoughts and generate feelings that are aligned with the potential that this energy represents. And the potential is infinite. It is literally infinite. And from that place, you have nothing but empathy and love and care and respect. And as a man, you would never want to objectify a woman or anybody ever again in that way, because everything is the sacred spark of life that is gifting us the opportunity to live, that is temporary in this form. And we have generationally evolved with such limited awareness of how sacred or special or incredible we truly are, that we haven't given it the attention that we could and that we are now. And that's why we're seeing the world going through this massive change, which is a result of people. Yeah. But it's a reharmonization, essentially.
It is beautifully said. I mean, that was a real powerful dialogue there. Anybody listening to the show and want to play that back, I mean, it takes you on a very quick journey through what sex has been, what it has become, the potential of what it could be, and how you can sort of redirect your energy around that. We're going to go ahead and close down this hour with a song. Do you have?
People are loving what you just shared, because I think so many people are really hungering for what you just shared. It takes away the feeling of loneliness, because a lot of times we have used and been conditioned to use sex to feed our loneliness, when really what we're searching for and what we really ultimately are looking for is that connection with the divine.
Holiness. Whole, as in holistic, the whole thing, holiness.
Yes. And I am going to play a requested song by Angel. Angel feels that this song is what the world needs now. And I agree. What the world needs now is love. And we're actually going to play the Sheila E. version. So stay tuned. Thank you for listening to Awakening Code Radio. And we'll be back with Seth.
Be right back.
Seth Pruzansky.
What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just to love. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Lord, we don't need another mountain. There are mountains and hillsides enough to climb, and there are oceans and rivers enough to cross, enough to last till the end of time. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just
just for some, but for everyone. Lord, we don't need another meadow. There are cornfields and wheat fields enough to grow. There are sunbeams and moonbeams enough to shine. Oh, listen, Lord, if you wanna know what the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. What the world needs now.
Well, thank you for joining us here on Awakening Code Radio. We are doing something a little different that we haven't done before. We divided two shows into halves. Last week, we were talking with Seth. Go ahead, Michelle, say his last name because I can't remember it.
I love that his on Facebook, it's Seth Leaf Pruzansky. Did I say it right?
Yep. Yeah.
Pruzansky. But I like that his middle name is Leaf because it brings us back to nature.
So if you missed that first half of the show, Seth talked us through a lot of things. One, his personal journey. He had some real trials and tribulations, heroin addiction as a young man, just kind of quit cold turkey, but had a family in Jamaica really help him out and opened up his life. And he so eloquently talked about the divine masculine. That was the last about 10 minutes of the show. Lots of great information. And tonight, even though we're kind of messing around with time here, the next Tuesday is election night. So when this podcast will be airing for the first time live, we'll be on election night. And we've done 2 other election nights on the show. We've been on long enough where Trump won last, and then before that, Obama. And we decided this year not to be doing a live show. There was so much energy back 4 years ago. And I think Michelle and I both were feeling like we're not a political show.
And Colleen. Colleen did not want to be on the air live either.
We're not a political show per se, but there's many ways that we can talk about politics in the greater, what we talked about a lot on our last week's show was being the observer. And to me, politics is an expression, primarily of a matriarchal system that feels like it's running on its last cylinder in an 8-cylinder car, that all the bustle, all the bravado, all the name calling, all the things that just what politics have turned into, the polarization. If you believe this guy is good, you're an idiot, and vice versa. But that same option of pulling back and being the broader observer, I think, is more critical now than ever. And as we start talking about politics, because we have an hour and it's not going to be all politics, but when you start going down the road of where did politics even come from and where did this power struggle, where did the structure of the few ordering the many around, whether it was a king in a kingdom or whatever, that the elite few said, we're the ones who's going to decide what everybody else is doing. That system feels like it's kind of fraying all over the world, all at the same time. And no matter what happens on election night, it feels like we are going to really see something. I think I've called Trump, and this doesn't mean anything good or bad, the great disruptor. And maybe we need the great disruption. I'm not a fan of his personal character, of the way he presents his ideas or the name calling and things. But is he something that maybe we need or the world needs? Possibly. He is, if nothing else in my mind, someone who disrupts and shakes things and doesn't seem to care what almost anybody thinks other than people that might vote for him or fans. And I just think maybe that's a place to start, is the phenomenon that has been the Trump experience for the last 4 years, but broaden our conversation out into politics and just power in general.
Hey,
What?
Seth, how about this?
Yeah.
Would you mind if I read the post that really got my attention that you posted? If I read it on air, and then we can go from there, because I really feel like that's what led me into wanting you to lead this show tonight. When our listeners, if they're listening live on election night or getting ready to, go vote, because we are recording it a week before. But this is what got me. I'm going to read it because it's a pretty quick read, and then we'll go into how you came to this. So he writes on his Facebook post, and everybody listening, it's Seth Leaf, Leaf, Pruzansky, Pruzansky, if you want to look at his Facebook. And his website is I'm Awake, Now What? And his book is called The Fight to Enlight. So we'd like everybody to go get that book if you're interested. And here's what Seth wrote. Okay, I'm just going to be completely real here and state my political stance once and for all to clear this up. There's way more going on than I could ever believe. So why would I limit my human perception with externally based, unprovable belief systems that cause unnecessary stress to even consider? Especially when I can create and sustain rock solid, crystallized states of energetic frequency in and around my human body when I'm not associating with normal, conditioned, human-based perception. We are outlandishly, predominantly quantum-based beings held back by nothing other than the limits of our own human senses. And most of those limitations have been conditioned into us in this one lifetime. And we are the ones responsible for doing this to ourselves. There's no one to blame. There's no us and them. We are them, and they are us. The reasons above and more are why I progressively choose to identify with infinity. It hasn't always been the most grounded path, but at least I know it's real, and it's got my back. And it keeps me out of the spell or illusion that most don't even realize they're under. The dire collective condition that we perceive around us is a direct reflection of the most predominant states of being that most of us embody and project out into the world most of the time. So then to truly change the world requires truly changing and sustaining a new state of being, personally from the inside out. This is the most direct way to affect the collective. Otherwise, you're a prisoner in your own human perception, incarcerated on a prison planet, and you are fooling yourself into believing that you're actually free. Oh yeah, did I mention politics? The GDP of the country of Bhutan is happiness. That means their most important priority is a state of being that their people embody. What is the rest of the world focused on? I'm going to keep chipping away at cultivating the energetic frequencies of happiness and joy that result from identifying with infinity. You're welcome to join me if you want.
Nice.
That got my attention.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And I think we would all be wise to pull back and until we can breathe again. I feel like so many people are barely breathing through this. They're so wrapped up and feeling so tense that almost like they're out of breath to even launch an attack, because whether it's COVID or other things that have been happening. So just what you said there, to pull back, breathe, relax, and think of joy and happiness and calm are as available to you now as they ever have been. And they're calling to you harder through all this than I think they ever have. So thank you for sharing that. And a great conversation, I'm sure, is about to happen here on election night. So let's go back a little bit. Have you had political leanings before where you're really rah about somebody and thinking that the government's going to step in and make things either great or horrible for us?
On a base level, the most political that I've been is we vote every day with the dollars that we spend. That is kind of like the core, politics is such a follow the money game that is so built upon values and principles that are based in inequality, right? It's going to benefit the few and forget the many. So to try to take it seriously is like a joke, and that's why so many people want to fight it and change. But to fight it and change it the way most people think they're supposed to do creates so much stress inside of their own body that they don't end up making that much change, and they take a real beating internally by thinking they're going to change the world in that way. So no, I've actually never voted for anybody, and I vote for life. I vote for my internal and external breath. I vote on putting my attention to where it is going to pay me the most, which is by making sure I am engaged with and sustaining an internal state of coherence. To me, that's where the true value is, the priceless value. And when you look at politics, this world view of politics that so many are so heavily invested in on so many levels, it is really the epitome, the outward expression of a totally ignored internal root cause that most are not taking responsibility for. So what we see playing out on the global stage is really its roots are based internally inside of us. And most people don't even realize that. The ones who do begin to start realizing that it might be a possibility, as I said in the last show, aren't necessarily armed with the tools or internal resources to be able to deal with it. And so they just feel like, okay, I'm not even going to bother trying to change myself. I'm going to vote for this person and hope that they change the world based upon this narrative that I'm hearing on TV or through others or whatever. And oh my God, like when you look at that and like I tell people, it doesn't matter who wins for president because we have a world full of national leaders who are not thinking or feeling in alignment with the natural laws of this planet. They're not managing their countries in ways that are sustainable and in coherence. Let's say we got one leader somewhere, like in Bhutan or wherever. I don't know their politics necessarily, but that example was great because of the prioritization of values. Like these people value happiness and value internal states of being, not land, not possessions, not things like we do here. And their lives are very different. That's why you see a lot of people in third world countries that don't have very much, but they're very happy, a lot of them. And then you see people on the other side who have it all and they're grumpy, they're upset, they're stressed out. What is that? So there's real fundamental issues that are going on in our human collective experience. A president of a country could make all the great rules in their country, but there's still tons of other countries dumping plastic, dumping trash, running big corporations with toxic chemicals that are being mined out of the earth, literally raped, just taken, and that we all are supporting, even if we don't want to, even if we know better, we are all part of something, supporting something that isn't going to change with whoever becomes president at this election. If we're going to change what really needs to be changed, it's going to take a radical decision by every individual who truly loves life and cares to make that change internally. And that is to choose to first align yourself with the natural rhythms of your body, because that eventually will get you and your body in tune with the natural rhythms of the earth, of the solar system, of the galaxy, of the universe. And when an individual has embodied that type of change, they're able to self-actualize it in a way that truly promotes the kind of change that so many of us want to see in this world.
That's powerful stuff. And you hit on so many things. One, the way you vote, voting with your dollar. And what are we voting for? You know, as soon as I became aware in high school of thinking about what the lobby system is in politics, that you pay somebody to go lobby your cause, and that's a fundamental aspect of the way our government works. It's like, well, doesn't that just seem blatantly crooked to a lot of people? There's so many things about government. And, you know, you said you don't vote, not much of a voter myself. And people would just go, how could you not be? It's your, you know, you're right. And you can't complain if you don't. And I'm like, listen, if you didn't like the mafia, because you said the mafia is a really crooked system, and most people would agree with you, you don't join the mafia and work in its own realms to make change. You go and make the change, like Buckminster Fuller said, you initiate a change that makes the old way obsolete. And I think we are, amidst all the clatter and noise and din and confusion and fake news, we are igniting people. And I don't know how many. It could be a few thousand, it could be in the low millions, but a critical mass of people that are unplugging from all of these things quicker than they realize they even could, to go and watch the news thinking you're responsible, to vote and think that's the responsible thing to do, to rally behind a candidate because that's responsibility. I think so much is in the air that there are going to be people that have a different vision of what life will look like. I think we're in the very beginning stages of defining what future life is going to look at like for a long time. I think it's like a phoenix rising, and I think things need to collapse. Things need to just become unglued. And like I said, I just think Trump's role might be the great ungluer. When you convince everybody that what is fake news, what isn't. Now we have the digital age where you can't tell if somebody's really there or saying something or if that's their voice. When you start saying, I don't know what to believe, well, then what can you believe in? You can believe in yourself.
Believe in yourself.
That's it. That's like the last thing.
I have to share something with both of you. I was telling I call her one of my adopted daughters, Raquel, that you were going to be on the show today, Seth. And I sent her one of your posts, and she was really excited to hear you. And she direct messaged me on Instagram and sent me this meme, I guess you could say. And it's George Carlin. If you remember the comedian, he's since passed away, a meme about his thoughts on politics. And it says, on election day, I stay home. 2 reasons. First of all, voting is meaningless. This country was bought and paid for a long time ago. The empty, and I can't say this word, stuff, I'll just say, the empty stuff they shuffle around and repackage every 4 years doesn't mean a thing. Second, I don't vote because I firmly believe that if you vote, you have no right to complain. I know some people like to twist that around and say, if you don't vote, you have no right to complain. But where's the logic in that? Think it through. If you vote and you elect dishonest, incompetent politicians and you screw things up, then you're responsible for what they've done. You voted them in. You caused the problem. You have no right to complain. I, on the other hand, who did not vote, who in fact did not even leave the house on election day, am in no way responsible for what these politicians have done and have every right to complain about the mess you created, which I had nothing to do with. Why can't people see that? I could just hear George Carlin's crass voice.
I've heard part of that exact
he says that speech
routine. Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah.
And it goes on. You can find that on YouTube, George Carlin Politics. It goes on for about 15 minutes and gets very succinct about the money, the greed, everything that politics is. And incorporate, and it's really run by the corporations.
Well, what I want to bring into the conversation, into the dialogue, Seth, is I have been aware and witnessed how passionate people are about their opinions about one side or the other. Divide and conquer, such division. And I just want to pour my heart out to every single person no matter who they think is the right person for the job, and just hug them. I just want to hug everyone and just say, let's turn back inside and see what we can do, our own internal work, like what you were talking about in the first half, the first segment of the I'm awake, now what? Once you have this awakening process, this awakening experience where you more or less realize that we are part and particle of the all that is, that our consciousness is creating our reality. That as we put these thoughts out, as we put emotions out, as we put, whatever our deeds and actions are, whatever energy, we're all energy, whatever we're putting out into the collective is creating our reality. It's creating our moments. So when I've been triggered by a few different things during this whole experience, it feels like an experiment almost. I have to really check myself with what energy am I putting out into the collective? Is it really what I want to see in the world? So constantly going back in and redirecting that energy. And I know that you can speak to this about how we can use our energy and focus it in the direction that we want to go. That is the quantum leap for the evolution of our species.
Yeah, absolutely. Essentially, it's the quantum leap of the evolution of the soul is what it comes down to. We are not who we think we are. We are not what we think this world is, but we are the energy that is animating our being. And when we have really routinely and habitually made a habit out of placing value on that and identifying with the virtues of an expansive, open, energetic state of being more than the limitations of a constricted, fear-based state of being that is derived almost primarily from the conditioning of our upbringing, then suddenly we have a very different outlook about how we want the world to look. And you start to get out of these layers of human belief, of indoctrination, of cultural and traditional belief systems that so many ascribe to, even if they're not like real, they were never theirs to begin with, and they buy into it and believe it anyway, like it is theirs, like it's all they've got. What if none of that was real? What if none of anything that we think is actually happening is real? And what if what is really happening here is only accessible by an individual who has decided to just let go of all that stuff and start redirecting their attention back inwards and feeling the true energy, the true currency that is flowing through their entire being and giving them this human experience. Because when you do that and you get into that state of being and you start to sustain it, the energetic signature that you emit and put out to the world is going to be very different than, say, somebody who wants to fight for their opinion, even if it's not right, then be at peace. I mean, look at how many people would rather just fight and argue, and these opinions and beliefs that may not even be right to begin with, than be in a state of calm or peace. So we've got our values, I don't even want to say backwards, because everything is perfect the way it is right now, in the sense that it all had to get to this point so that we could so it could pop, or that we could take an evolutionary leap in our own perception. But we needed this pressure, this buildup to get to this place. But the real question is, what are we going to do? Because so many are feeling so much right now, and they're reacting to it in the only way they know how, which is fear, which is anxiety, which is all these things. And of course, that's natural to do that. But to stay or continue to do that instead of feeling it, being aware that it's happening, and in the face of it, choosing to calm down, become that observer, that taking on that objective observer role, suddenly whatever it is that you're feeling in that moment from an expanded state becomes a lot more manageable. and you get to see it for what it is. It's a temporary glitch in the fabric of perceived time that most invest true value in being, when the real value is outside of that. It's in this energy that we are. It's in our life. It's in the fact that we are so blessed to even have human perception or live in a human body. So that was kind of like a roundabout way of answering it. But that's really what it comes down to. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be in harmony with reality? That's the question.
And that is the perfect segue to the song we're going to play. Last election, 4 years ago, we had our dear friend Larissa Stowe in the studio before we even found out who our next president was. And we played this song, and it seems so appropriate for right now. This is Larissa Stowe and Shakti Tribe with Peacemakers, the Peacemakers.
Yeah, I love this song. Thank you for tuning into Awakening Code Radio. We'll be right back.
Love, 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 love your enemies. Love, 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 love your enemies. Yeah. Good, 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 good to those who hurt you. Good, 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 good to those who hurt you. Love, 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 love your enemy. Yeah, yeah, yes. Love, 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 love your enemy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do good, 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 good to those who hurt you. Do good, 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 good to those who hurt you. Yeah, 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 yeah. We shall be the peacemakers. We shall be the peacemakers, and we shall be called. We shall be called the children of God. Children of God. The children of God. Bless, 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 bless those who curse you. Bless, 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 bless those who curse you. And pray, pray, pray for those who abuse you. And pray, pray, pray for those who abuse you. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Haven't heard that song in a while. That is such a good song. Peacemakers. Or you're smiling, but you're not talking.
I just feel like that is one of the most appropriate songs for getting us through this time. No matter who gets in office, no matter what's happening in that political landscape, bringing our awareness back to the infinite nature of ourselves, of our what we're capable of. And I Seth, you really tap into it when you talk about we don't even really know the extent of who we truly are as souls. And we're here to remember our soul's journey. We really, really are. And this is the time, if not now, when? I mean, this is it. This is the now moment. And Seth, you and I, when we were speaking earlier today, one of the things that you and I were really tuning into and feeling is how quickly things are moving right now and how fast this restructuring is taking place. Where quite possibly, if we saw the demise of the Roman Empire over 600 years or so, it feels to me like things are moving a lot faster. So if that's the case, we have the ability to shift things for the better instead of collapsing in on ourselves. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. It feels like time is moving so fast because there's so much pressure that is stress derived because everybody is anticipating a future that they either want or don't want. And they're so hyper obsessively focused on that that they have all but forgotten what it is that will truly create the future that they want to see, which is this internal state of being that you are responsible for harmonizing and being at peace with and projecting that out into the world instead of these beliefs, these ideas that were never ours to begin with for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, we have placed a lot of our identities in big things around us, and it can be, as shallow as it is, talking about your possessions, your car or whatever. There's your first model out, what your life looks like based on exterior things, but that energy can carry all the way out into the politic system where you base a lot of your identity. And I don't think that was probably ever supposed to be a part of it. Certainly, I don't think it was from our founding fathers that was supposed to be a part of it. You wanted to serve the greater good. The politicians, I truly believe, in their own limited way, because of course they still had slavery and everything else, but they were motivated to think just the greater good for all, like the Ubuntu movement. Michael Tellinger would say, "Good for us, good for everybody, good for everybody, good for the individual." We now, I think we're just like dogs chasing tails. We want to invest in a belief that there is a party that is going to fix things. And both parties are really, they're both sides of the same coin. They're both answering to big corporations. They're both motivated, by the industrialized military machine. It truly is the moment where we need to take our power back non-violently. I've never gotten this, calling a weapon like a giant bomb the peacemaker, or that we're fighting our way to peace. That is the most illogical thing there could ever be. You don't eat yourself to be thin, you don't shout yourself into quiet, you don't fight your way into peace. And that is just an invitation to bring all the arrows and signs back upon yourself, all the lenses, because you are the only thing. If you're into government, the only real government there is self-government. I don't know if that was Buckminster Fuller or somebody said, but I'm just remembering it now. But the only real form of government is self-government. And that makes so much sense to me.
It's amazing how many people trust governments or governing bodies or corporations or businesses more than they do the love of their own family members.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about how illogical and crazy that is, you're just like, okay, where are we putting our attention,
And when you think about the many layers of that and how we have you know, how many people we have on Earth. There's a lot of people on Earth. And when you even think about how do we govern ourselves if, you know, people haven't come to this place, we're all on a path, we're all on a journey, and everybody's at one place or another on the spectrum of that. So let's say, you know, there's disruption. When you see disruption in the streets, I mean, who's going to protect you? Right. Eric, when you did your channeling, when I asked the questions of your counsel, I asked about many people are arming themselves right now. And I asked about that because both Eric and I have a firm commitment that we would never take another person's life.
Yeah.
But not everybody believes that way. So we are in this space in between of wanting to co-create a new world that, you know, some would say that you can't find utopia, or, you know, how are you going to get that with so many differing viewpoints and so many differing personalities? And you mentioned and touched upon earlier karmic situations and lifetimes that people have come in with but haven't done the work to clear or even delve into to find out what makes them tick or what makes that particular, you know, situation for them so difficult or challenging. So how do we make that bridge? This is the time where many of us are looking to being a bridge to get to the other side of that.
Yeah. It's really just about putting it into perspective and doing that over and over and over and zooming out, being that objective onlooker who is not so addicted, you could say, to the belief that I'm this human having this human experience and that's all that I am, but more that there is this force of energy that is animating my being. And what if that is what I really am? And what if what I really am is more important than who I think I am? And when you begin to start to perceive things in that way, suddenly you start feeling a lot less like the human that thinks they have all these problems. And you start feeling a lot more like the energy that all of this is coming from. And in doing that and committing to that process, you find out that this temporary thing, this being that you are, is being illuminated by a living geometric field that is birthed from eternity. And it is expressing itself through you, but that your human self that is resisting certain parts of it or going along with certain parts is a part of something that has been recycled or reincarnated throughout countless lifetimes. And so it's like the two are coming to a head. There's this physical perception of the way things appear to be, but then there's this non-physical energetic force that's allowing it all to take place in the first place. And everybody's focused on the perception of the physical world around them and their life in it, instead of becoming expansively aware of the energy that is causing them to be aware of it in the first place. So there's a difference, a major difference in the way we perceive ourselves. Now, the first one, if you just think this is all you are, then you're going to live by the laws of man, by the laws of that are currently in place, corporate laws, human laws, government laws. You believe that to be the model that you are living your life in. And so you become subjected to all of these external means and thoughts and ways of being that totally guide the course of your life, while this internal aspect that truly makes up the bulk of what you really actually are gets ignored. So it's at what point do we as individuals say, you know what, I may not know exactly what's going on, but I know something is going on, and I'm going to start disinvesting or taking my attention out of the things that I've been so heavily invested in and start investing them, even if it's a little bit internally. and keep doing it long enough, commit to it long enough until you start to see things happen in your life, till you start to see changes in your own body and in the world around you. Because I can tell you this, when I went to prison and I was in this place where I didn't want to be around people I did not want to be around, and feeling like my world was so claustrophobic and just had me, felt like I had no choice but to go inward. And that's what I did. And I went inward and I went inward and I just kept doing it and just revealed layer before layer before layer until there was nothing left but my awareness of this energy that is animating my being. And suddenly I wasn't feeling like I was in prison or stuck at all. I was feeling free, like not only free, but free and connected to the essence of what I truly am. And the most beautiful thing happened because I had done that so much, like every day practice, just did it because what was happening to me in that environment wasn't working for me no matter what. And I knew that I wasn't going to let it get the best of me, best of me. So, but I just did this and did this. And once I began sustaining it and feeling what it felt like to be sustained, I wasn't limited to my body at all. I was feeling the energy in me, around me, all over. And these men that I was sharing this place with were feeling it too. And when you witness things that you do inside of yourself having an energetic effect on people around you, especially people who you wouldn't think would care about things like this or even consider them, but it's your energetic signature is so powerful because it is so aligned with all the organs of your body, and your body is so in coherence with the energies of the earth, and it goes on forever. When your conscious perception is attuned to all of this internally and external coherence that exists all around, people around you feel it. They don't know what it is, they don't know why it is, but they feel it. And I had so many of these men come up to me and just be like, what is this? Like, what is happening? And they didn't know, like, and they were like, they did know, they're like, whenever I'm around you, I feel great. But when I go over there, I don't. They're like, what is that? And it just simply, I was like, it's you. It's you. It's the part of you that you are becoming aware of that you really are. That makes up more of your reality than you or anybody ever taught you did. But now that you're feeling it, because it's not limited or constrained to the edge of your skin or your body, it is everywhere. It is so big, it is infinite. Now that you're feeling that and you are aware that that is a part of what you are, you now have a choice to keep being and doing the things and being the person that you always were, getting the same results you always got. Or now that you've had this expansive awareness, you can memorize what that feels like and start making choices that are going to lead you into a direction where you can begin to experience more of what that potential represents. And I watched so many of these guys. I mean, there was a lot that they just didn't want anything to do with it. They just didn't care. Didn't matter at all. But there were so many of them that felt it and were so turned on by it. And then we would talk and we'd have these conversations and they'd get so excited about it because they're like, oh my God, I can use this energy to create a great life and make a better world and certainly not live a life in a prison. And I watched them become passionate about this. I watched them consider their life from the perspective of a young child who hadn't been hurt or abused, where the awe and wonder and potential still exist in their eyes. And I watched some of these men begin to reclaim or heal that inner child and reclaim the potential and possibility that exists in that state of being when when we haven't allowed the world or the world hasn't taken it from us. And it is this that we as individuals, when we begin to embody, when we begin to prioritize as number one and live our lives in a way where we're becoming more of the energy field that we are and less of the worries and anxieties and fears and problems that we are addicted to, then we start to see the change in our body, in the world around us. And it doesn't take that many times of witnessing how doing something internally creates an external effect before you realize, okay, this is worth doing. This is worth giving my attention to. And if enough people, it doesn't even take that many, if enough people become aware that this is a possibility and worth investing their attention in, then a few people can do the work of millions. Because when you get in alignment with the frequencies of being in these coherent states, your whole energetic signature elevates to a frequency that is so much more in alignment with universal frequencies that make up the bulk of what is actually going on, in juxtaposition to this limited human experience that, even as big and complicated and messy as it seems, is really in actuality very small compared to this great universal structure that is filtering through all of us. So from that place, it just becomes obvious that that's how the world changes. We change ourselves to start looking more like that, then it starts to say, hey, wow, you've given all this attention to me. I'm going to give it back, because it truly is a reciprocal relationship, because we're actually not disconnected from it. We are it, it is us. Same thing here on the planet. We are them, they are us. It is all one unified system. The only thing that inhibits the recognition that it is a perfect unified system is the conditioning of the human being as it has persisted through this life and countless other lifetimes. So in retrospect, what is holding us back from the realization that we literally are everything always is very small compared to what everything actually is.
The micro magnifying, reflecting the macro. We hear about spiritual leaders that live the life that you just eloquently described, Jesus, Buddha, the Dalai Lama, that aren't going to change their mind because life was unfair to them. They're going to be the pacifists, the lovers, the people of service, all through their existence. Those are the people that are held up on the pedestals. The one that always comes to mind to me is Anne Frank, because she was none of those things. She was a young schoolgirl witnessing the atrocities in Nazi Germany, seeing her family, being carted off to be killed, and living up in fear every day that the Nazis are going to come into their cellar or basement or attic or wherever she was hiding. And yet she somehow broke through that barrier, that veil, and said, I can still believe everything I want to believe about myself and what life really is, and write about it and share it. She's such a motivator, but I just call it like a verb now. You're Anne Franking it. You're just realizing that you're standing in this place of power over yourself. That's really what this is all about. And realizing that you are attuned to the macro. You are a micro representation. You're a drop of water in the ocean, which seems insignificant until you realize the drop reveals the entire essence of what the ocean is. That's how connected you are. We're down to our last 5 minutes. You wrote a book called I'm Awake Now What?
No. That's his website.
Oh, that's your website. So I just want to hear an encapsulation, because I think you probably have some sort of idea once we've called ourselves woke or awake, and I don't usually put it into definitive ending like that, like enlightened or awakened, but we reach a certain plateau where at least we understand we're on awakening path. What is next?
Sustaining it, just making a concerted effort to face your fears, to face your triggers, your limitations, from an expansive state of being. Because if you face all those things from a state of fear, you're just going to create more of the same. But if you get expansive, you get coherent, you lighten up, you get calm, then you face the things that are holding you back from that place. They dissolve much quicker. And that allows this natural energy that is flowing through all of us to have a much greater ease of flow, because a lot of the past traumas, issues, things that have happened to us, we hold in our body that prevent us from being able to feel this natural flow of energy that is going on in us at all times. So learning how to sustain that energy is paramount to quote unquote staying awake.
Awesome.
You really inspire me, Seth, and your whole family, it seems like, is really dialed in. I noticed that your dad and mom just wrote their own book, Howie and Steph. Is that are those their names? What's the name of their book?
From Brooklyn to the backwoods of Maine.
From Brooklyn to the backwoods of Maine. They talk about being hippies, and I'm looking forward to reading their book as well. And I love that you're in business with your brother, and witnessing the level of just beauty that you share with your son River. River's 8. Is River 8 now?
Yeah.
Just seeing that through your Facebook posts. Like I told you earlier, I have never researched a guest as much as I did with you, just because I felt very inspired and connected by all the different pieces of you. You're a very balanced man. You appear to be anyway. And I would like to think that you are leading the way. You are being a bridge. And I thank you so much for the way that you're speaking up, speaking out, so many different podcasts. I highly recommend to our listeners to go check out all the different podcasts that you've done with. You've been interviewed by a lot of people, and each interview I found focused on a lot of, kind of honed in on some of the different topics. We touched lightly upon some of the topics, but the one podcast, I think it's called In the Trees, that really went in depth about how you broke away from addiction, and the heart brain coherence that you talked about with some of the other podcasters, and also the divine feminine panel, the divine masculine panel. I really appreciate your views on divine union and the toxic masculine versus the masculine that I think many of us would like to see us get to, in terms of where we're going and how we're going to balance out these energies and co-create a better world, a more beautiful place. And just thank you. Thank you. Thank you for doing everything that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, we are all leading together, and that's the point of it. I know that if I can help enough people remember how beautiful they are and how they do have within them the ability to change themselves, there'll be so many of us leading together. There's no more hierarchy, there's no more competition. It's cooperation, it's equality, and it comes from us being in an equalized state, in harmony with nature, with the universe as it exists. And that is so much more real than this totally out of coherent, chaotic world that so many people are just so focused on. So time to just back up a little, just let go of some of that stuff, because it's so temporary anyway, and just start focusing on the stuff that's a lot longer lasting. There's a lot more value there. There's a lot more love. There's a lot more just to inspire you to conduct your own human life in a way that is reflective of these great celestial states of being that occur all around us, and that also occur at a microscopic level in the world around us. We are so beautiful. We are so magical. And the more that enough of us can get into that state, sustain it, and then express it in this world fearlessly, not even caring what anybody thinks at all, because you love yourself, you love others, you know that this is just a temporary blip in time, that is being evolved through, it is being worked through, and you're just going to hold space for it as it does it. Everything that prevents you from doing that in a way that would limit you goes away, and the real life just starts empowering you to do this. And I know everybody can do it, because it's not a big deal, really. It's the biggest deal, but it's not a big deal.
It's a big deal. Sometimes things are tragically simple. You know, you take Christ consciousness messages, do unto others as they would do unto you. It's not difficult to get in concept, but very difficult to go out and, for many people anyway, I don't want to say it's very difficult, but it's proven very difficult. People go to church, get the message, and then right back into quote unquote reality, or that's not going to work. But that's not true. That is not the truth. The truth is that even though they're the weight of them is heavy, the concept of them is comprehensible. And I think that that's really significant. Why people like Jesus said, you can have the innocence of a child and get all this stuff, because it's not rocket scientists. It's not advanced physics. It's something that we're wired to be able to understand. And just imagine a world where people are compassionate, caring, kind, and loving and forgiving of each other. If that feels like the world you want to live in, you go live in that world, but you got to participate. You got to act like you know what that world functions like, and you're going to be a participating member of that world. And that's not hard to figure out either. It's just not easy to do and hold on to all your other beliefs.
Well, that's it. It's not easy to do, just because there's so much stress in our bodies that have equated to a very serious outlook that most of us possess and sustain. And it's in that playful, just open, trusting state that life can truly evolve and that things can truly happen. So we did this to ourselves without realizing it. Essentially what it comes down to. It wasn't the government, it wasn't somebody else. Things happen to us, but the way we react to them, that's what defines us. The more we choose to recondition ourselves in accordance with a potential that we might just have as an imagination, and do it playfully, lighthearted, smiling, that is going to bring results that work.
Absolutely. We've kind of fallen asleep at the wheel sort of for the last few thousand years. And I do believe we are waking up. Hence Awakening Code Radio. We knew that awakening was a very important part of the work.
Shout out to Victoria McBain. She's loving this conversation.
Hey, Victoria.
She loves your, Seth, what you said, sustain everything. She's got a big pet peeve about how much plastic we use. She would just love to get rid of plastic. And, you know, she says, yay, Eric. So I know that it's been a great conversation, and I'm sure that we'll tune back in with you again. I really would like to have you on several times, because we can go deeper and deeper into each one of these segments and topics.
Really into anything, and you know that too. Like, yeah, the more we can focus on something and just go right into it if people want to do that.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. You have been an amazing guest. You missed last week's show where we talked about Seth's story, getting started, and who he is and things that shaped his life. That's an amazing conversation. And of course, tonight we kind of kept it a little bit in the framework of politics without getting political, looking at it in broad spectrum, because this is election night. And want to thank all of our listeners. Stay tuned into Awakening Code Radio. Michelle, do you have a song to play us out on?
You know, it's interesting that my phone all of a sudden is playing all these different songs as I didn't even touch it. I don't know, Eric. You don't have a song that you want to play, huh?
I don't. If you don't have something in your phone,
how about I got Incubus Drive? How about that?
Why not?
You want to go out with some Incubus?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Seth. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll
Big
stay in
hugs.
touch, I'm sure. We'll see you next week. Be good humans, everybody. You got that there?
Did it not play?
It looks like it's trying to play. How about that? There we go.
There we go.
We'll see you next week, everybody.
Sometimes I feel the fear of uncertainty stinging clear. And I can't help but ask myself how much I let the fear take the
KXRN LP,
Laguna Niguel, Laguna Beach.
member supported.
KXFM
on 104.7.
KXFMradio.org.